Hi there, and welcome to Letters from Paradise, number 24. In Jesus' commission to his disciples, he includes this interesting line: "Teach them to obey everything I have commanded you." So who thinks we ought to see what Jesus' commandments were? I mean, we know the 10 Commandments, and we know that the Old Testament was riddled with commands and observances. But what about Jesus? What were his commands to the God learners? Well, there is only one actually, but one that has many beautiful facets flowing from it. Jesus said, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." And 2 chapters later in John's Gospel, "My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down your life for your friends. Love each other." Then John in his first letter writes, "This is his command, to believe in the name of his Son Jesus Christ, and to love one another as he commanded us." And in his second letter, John writes, "As you have heard from the beginning, his command is that you walk in love." St. Paul speaks about the commandment of Jesus this way: "The whole point of the command of our Saviour is simply love uncontaminated by self-interest and counterfeit faith, a life open to God." And showing a facet of living as a lover, Paul writes, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." Are we getting the picture here? It's all about love. So if we were to insert that into this Great Commission, we would have something like, "Go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to love one another as I have loved, and surely I am with you always." And in case we're tempted to go searching in the Old Testament for some commands to obey, Jesus cuts us off at the pass and tells us that all the commands of Old Testament law and prophets hang on his commandment to love God and neighbour. There are between 70 and 100 million people living in the Roman Empire at the time Jesus is commissioning his followers. 1/2 are slaves, the personal property of their masters. Some wealthy Romans own as many as 20,000 slaves. Few in the Roman Empire are part of the wealthy senatorial class. Most belong to the poor plebeian class. More than half the population is dependent on the regular distribution of free grain. This is the scene all over the empire, including Jerusalem. And it's into that world Jesus says, "Go and make disciples, God learners, and teach them to love." Other-centeredness was hardly on the agenda for any of them, especially an other-centered love between the rich and the poor of the Roman Empire. Now add to that the religious divide. There were between 3 and 8 million Jews in the empire, and they were despised and thought of as having strange practices by most Greeks and Romans. And the Jews themselves were hardly excited about their religion. They were bound to stifling regulations and requirements, with no fresh touch from heaven in sight. Here they all are: resentment, pride, suspicion, intolerance, and envy is rife. And for vast numbers, a resignation that they would die as unfulfilled and as unhappy as they lived. And into that world, Jesus says, "Go and make disciples, teaching them love. Raise up learners and lovers. Create a love community among the rich and poor, the victors and the victims, the Jews and the Greeks, the slaves and the free. Bring them all together as a people who want to keep learning me, a people who want to keep learning love. And they did just that with this uncomplicated love mandate. Oh, let's get back to that. There's not a person on the planet who's not been wired for love. There's not a culture on earth where love and relationship is not hungered for, where other-centered love is not esteemed. Friends, it's not by our music, our slick productions, our earnest evangelism, our sound teaching, or our modern facilities that all people will know that you are Jesus' disciples. No, it's because you're lovers. Oh, my friends, go and give someone a hug, and I'll see you again next week. Shalom.